Welcome everybody to this week's episode of Reanimated. We're a little delayed due to some of the holidays and holidays goings on, but we're back and we're going to do a bit of a double episode. Also, because we're trying to slog through season 8, we just figured it would be easier to do 4 instead of 2. So we'll be reviewing episodes 7 through 10 of season 8 of The Walking Dead, and lots going on, at least in 9. So, and this is the one that follows, this particular part is the story arc where Chandler Riggs is making his very long exit from the show, or at least that's how it felt to me. I am here as always with my intrepid co-host Stuart. Hello, Stuart.
Pew, pew, pew.
And before we jump into that, we have a couple of little news tidbits. There's a bit dearth of news items, probably because of the time of year, but there are a couple things. There is a new Kingdom trailer, and the more I see of this, the more excited I am to see it. And that's
it's a scary trailer.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. And I mean, I will say, I almost wish that they were not putting out so many trailers, because I'd almost prefer to be surprised a little bit. And it feels like they're revealing, I mean, we all know what it's about, and it looks cool enough as is. I don't know that they need to be revealing more, but it still looks pretty cool.
At least I'm not getting like storyline, not in depth anyway. It's
right.
And so what we know now is that we're talking about fast zombies, and they have some kind of foaming at the mouth thing that happens.
Yep.
And there's also going to be politics and generals and peasants, and yeah, I'm super pumped. And that is going to come out on the 25th of January, very soon.
Yep. And so I'm looking forward to that. I think they're showing off some of the martial arts, they're showing off some of the special effects. But I just don't want them to reveal a little too much anyway. In other news, which is on point given the fact that we're in season 8, the character Dwight is apparently going over to Fear the Walking Dead, and this rumor has been confirmed. So he'll be joining Morgan in this series, and we'll see what happens. And if this, I mean, I'm sure there will be some conflict between him and the other group, and Morgan knows his past and he knows Morgan's past, so that'll be kind of interesting to see how that plays out with the new players for The Walking Dead.
And will he show up with Sherry or not?
That is the question.
Yeah. Well, we haven't got to that part of season 8, but I guess spoiler alert, he must survive this season. And the other part of this is Eric Kane from Forbes, of course, thinks this is a bad idea. Do you remember the heady days when Forbes used to love everything about Fear the Walking Dead?
Yeah, well, maybe they got to mix it up a little bit. But, no, they don't seem to be very happy about this idea. But I actually think that this is an interesting thing, because you can't really get into some of the... I mean, I guess you can if it's one-sided and if the character of Morgan reveals these things. But I think it's far more interesting to have somebody from your past show up. It's kind of like, when you're all into your life and then suddenly a childhood friend shows up and reveals all this stuff about you to your current cool friends. I don't know.
Yeah.
About how you used to crimp your hair and stuff.
Or in the case of Morgan, how you used to be the evil monster from a horror movie.
Yeah, that too.
Based on the episodes we just saw.
Yeah, I know.
Good Lord.
Whoa. And we're going to talk about this. I have some real questions about this.
Holy smokes! I think I had repressed those memories of Morgan going full evil.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, and then last up, Robert Kirkman decides to address the issue where everybody says that The Walking Dead is repetitive, i.e. the whole sort of battles between Rick and other leaders, or his group and other leaders, just kind of goes round and round.
How you encounter a new group, you get into conflict, and then you fight until you're out of conflict. Like that apparently is a critique that he's been getting.
Right. I don't know that he sheds all that much light on it, but he kind of is unapologetic about it. He's like, that's the way it is.
Well, I feel like Robert Kirkman is typically kind of unapologetic and gets a little defensive about stuff. But his argument is a good one. He's just like, look, that's just storytelling, like conflict, tension, drama, resolution. These are the building blocks.
Yeah, and I mean, I would also say that yes, this is true and this idea is true, but it's also examining what's happening with these characters because the characters are evolving as they're encountering these different scenarios. So,
Yes.
the Rick that encounters Negan is very different from the Rick that encountered the governor, et cetera, et cetera.
Something that Carl actually talks about, you know?
Right, right. So,
Yeah.
anyway, I think we should jump into it since we got. Although I will say, I think there's a lot more to cover in episodes 9 and 10 than in 7 and 8. But let's do a quick overview.
Well, before we jump right into that, I just wanted to talk about how exciting the next several weeks are, and then how kind of potentially troubling the rest of the year might be. We've got The Passage, which you and I are both a little skeptical about based on the trailers we've seen.
Yeah.
That's coming out on the 14th. That starts with the premieres on the 14th. Then right after that, or 2 weeks later, a week and a half later, comes Kingdom, which I don't know if that's going to be all released at once, bingeable, or one at a time. Like they've kind of switched their model up on Netflix. And then February 10th, season 9B of Walking Dead begins again. So just in terms of episodic content, we're going to have our hands full for a while. But then, like, what movie announcements have there even been for 2019? I'm kind of scratching my head thinking there's no Patient Zero still out there. And The Apocalypse finally came out.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit, I'm a little bit concerned that we don't have any, let's say, premiere projects out there in the wings still.
Well, I mean, we do have, it premiered, as we talked about, it premiered in Australia. The Weird Possession show that we had reviewed the first season, and
Outcast.
that's going to be Outcast is going to, I think, be released here in 2019. We've got, and we do have the return of Game of Thrones with Ice Zombies in April. So a few things to look forward to. I'm sure more will come out. But I'm not entirely shocked to see that there's more series versus movies coming out. And I think I'm very excited about Kingdom only because the trailers look amazing. So I have a feeling they're going to just let it all go in one binge-watchy, glorious sort of release, but that's just me. And of course, maybe at some point you can see Anna and the Apocalypse because I can imagine it would be on streaming pretty soon, given that the holiday season has passed, and we can talk about that once you get to feast your eyes upon it.
It's not like there's any shortage for you and I to talk about, but it's just a little bit. Usually I feel like there's at least one project that's out there in the future, like that's a movie. But, it's maybe we're just in the doldrums, and we'll get there in a few weeks, but just wanted to point that out. But you were saying we're going to jump into episode 7 of season 8, Walking Dead.
Yes, indeedy.
Time for After. And it was a Jadis line. It's so clearly a Jadis line. And also, I just like to foreshadow how happy I was when she finally stopped talking that way by the end of these episodes that we were watching.
Yeah, and they kind of try to explain why she talks that way, but that's still lame to me. I don't know that you could convince an entire group of people to talk so terribly. But, yeah.
So, episode 7 is a big... it's Time for After is a big Eugene and a big Rick episode, obviously. But I think it's more Eugene than Rick. And you kind of called this that we were going to be spending a lot of time with Eugene.
Time I don't think that we should spend because I just don't think he can carry it, and I honestly just do not think that this doesn't reveal anything we don't know about Eugene at all. Like, it just confirms more of the stuff we know about him. I was like, oh my gosh, this freaking episode's going on forever, and comes out exactly where you would expect it to. Inexplicably, you've got Daryl doing his plan to his ill thought out plan again. All this stuff. This was one of the things that infuriated me during season 8 because you have people doing things that you know that they would not do, and I just don't buy this. Like Morgan and Tara and Daryl all get in cahoots to sort of execute this plan, and like the whole thing is if they had just left it alone, Saviors would have been screwed. You know, like they would have been starved out. And so like that, this is just dumb. But anyway, so I'm already going to kvetch a bit about that. And then
so,
you've got
Eugene
Rick's,
at the beginning of this episode. Eugene basically gets guilt tripped by at every turn. And I know that you're saying like it doesn't really teach you anything new. Really, a lot of these episodes are about Eugene being tortured internally, rather, and you know, turning to his tiny drinking problem with his shot glasses of wine that he has to do, and then throw them up immediately. Like he's the worst binge drinker ever. He works his way through one bottle of wine over like 3 episodes. I'm just like, am I supposed to feel something for him other than pity? I think it's just pity. That's all you're supposed to feel. But he gets guilt tripped by Dr. Carter, by Gabriel, by Dwight, by one of the wives, and I think by Negan.
Yeah.
Like,
well, he doesn't as much get guilt tripped by Negan as he gets threatened by Negan. But
yeah, well, every conversation with Negan is just veiled threats or not so veiled threats. But yeah, so I did think it was. You're right. It doesn't actually present anything new, and Eugene ends up and kind of on the nose saying like that he's number one and he's going to take care of himself first. And that's
then he does, you know, the thing that I was fully expecting. You think he's going to out Dwight in terms of his like Eugene's always kind of keeping a card to himself. Yeah. He must see some advantage in hiding the fact that Dwight has been the traitor, and he does hide that fact. And there is a point when he's about to reveal it, then he just thinks better of it, almost just by seeing Dwight and having a second thought about it. So, and this is, I mean, I guess you can say that Dwight did have some effect by saying that, you know, this is Negan's world is over and you have to protect yourself and all that stuff. And, you know, so I think that there is at least some effect that he's having despite his brave words. But, you know, it's a torturous episode, honestly. And then there's what I was going to say is there's this wonderful scene with Rick and Jadis's group. And, you know, and we're tortured with more of their stupid talking and, you know, sculpting and all this crap. And I just think it's so frustrating to see these scenes. It's really just, I don't get what they were doing here with this whole group.
No, and they've certainly, and we talked about this when it was airing originally, that they've really been trying to walk this group back away from wherever the hell they ended up. And that's kind of what we start to see here is them walking them back towards, well, killing them all, and then walking Jadis back into a normal human being. By the end of this 4-episode run. Yep. Also, when they're coming up with a dumb plan to drive the dump truck into the sanctuary, first Rosita makes a really compelling argument to not do it.
Right.
Which is the first time Rosita's said anything sensible in a long, long time. And so I think people should really perk up and listen when she's like, you know, if I hadn't thought that I needed to do this, maybe Sasha would still be alive. And why does nobody like take a pause at that point and be like, oh God, yeah. And then, so she doesn't exactly persuade Michonne right then, but then several, I don't know, like dozens of minutes later in the episode, Michonne apparently is also convinced by Rosita's argument and tries to talk Daryl out of it. And he doesn't listen to her either. And that's just, at least you're getting a sense that there are people who see that this is a bad idea and are trying to stop them, but then they just go ahead and do it anyway. And what's funny, or not funny, it's sad and depressing, is after they realize that the plan has allowed the Saviors to escape, Rosita is one of the first people to tell Daryl, you don't know that it was because of your dumb hijinks
like, no,
that this happened. I'm like, actually,
it was definitely because of your mistake.
Well, none of them know, right? And that was one of the things she says, like, sometimes you don't get to know.
Yeah.
But even though that's like one of these weird Gimple, I assume it's Gimple's dialogue where they always speak in these like cryptic, not really the way anybody talks sentences. Like sometimes you just don't get to know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of this episode. It was right. And the garbage people end up running away again when Rick gets to the sanctuary and realizes or sees what has happened and that the Saviors are out. Like,
yeah, he does. I will say, like, good on whoever did Rick's sweaty, dirty makeup for this episode, because they did a really great job. He looks progressively sweatier and dirtier and more unhinged as this episode goes on. Of note, definitely, is his hair and sort of the sheen of grime upon him. And this is pretty much the case for this whole season for him, but especially these episodes coming up, he like really takes it to another level. So well done, makeup artist.
Well done. They must just have a bucket of Jerry Curl to like spritz him down with every.
Oh my god. And then, he also does the crazy Rick face when he sees the breached walls and the fact that it's all empty. So that's a very classic Rick surprise face. So yeah. That's and then and we also have Eugene jumping in with his plan for the escape of the sanctuary, and he's people listen to him. I mean, I think that one of the interesting things with Negan, like the dynamic between Negan and Eugene, is that Negan definitely gets Eugene's like shortcomings, but plays those to his advantage. And he absolutely values the fact that Eugene has this level of intelligence that nobody else has. So that I think is interesting, given how, I think other people are trying to manipulate him and other things, but I feel like Negan plays to Eugene's sense of power and safety in a way that others don't. And in some ways, it was somewhat how Abraham played it with him. So it's kind of interesting to watch that dynamic. And
what do you mean? How did Abraham play to Eugene the same way?
Well, Abraham made Eugene feel very safe. He always guaranteed, if Eugene found certain things or did certain things, that he would be okay. And that's sort of the dynamic Eugene is always looking for. He wants somebody to keep him safe because he knows he is just not that kind of a person. And so in some ways, Rick and others are always saying, we're never going to be safe. So it's not shocking that Eugene would be okay with Negan, because this is exactly the dynamic that he's used to and looking for. So I don't know, that was something that I was with the second watching, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But the only interesting thing about Eugene, at least in this particular thing.
Yeah.
We also have how these all episodes go down. Did you feel like the pacing of them, and just even how this, and now we're on to like episode 8, I guess, how the Saviors have basically made their plans so quickly to take out these communities? I guess there are a lot of them, but it feels like they've had a lot of them being taken out. So I felt like I was, even during first watching, but definitely during the second watching, I was a little bit puzzled about how they had enough, like, basically manpower to go into sort of execute these massive attacks. When...
I'm just curious how many of the Saviors have been killed on screen multiple times.
Right.
I've given up a long time ago trying to count how many Saviors have been killed on screen. What did we get to in season 7? It was something like 50 or 60. So, and then, easily hundreds more have been killed since then.
And then they're all going after, but even when they're in the sort of sanctuary, it doesn't seem, there's a lot of them, but it doesn't seem like there's that many of them, especially when you take into account that many of these are the workers and not the people that are going out and like assaulting people. Yeah. So the fact that they have 3 separate forces that can then take out Alexandria, Hilltop, and Kingdom, that seems just not plausible at all. And so that's kind of weird. It was something that just didn't really sit right with me. But anyhow, there is that part that and this particular episode for me was just like torture, just long and annoying.
Not to mention that they've talked about running low on ammunition a lot. Eugene's plan involves them shooting basically all the zombies, or the majority of the zombies that are outside. It's also, their plan is to like shoot the zombies to make walls to prevent other zombies from getting over, and this is something that Eugene like realizes when he's watching them trying to get up the stairs in the sanctuary, and he gets all jiggly faced and angry looking before he goes and presents this plan to Negan in the last episode. But in practice, sure, make walls out of zombies. It makes it harder for them to climb over. Got it. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
But in practice, how are you supposed to make these two beautifully clean lines of zombie walls that they seem to make those? Like the zombies were 30 deep on the outside of the sanctuary.
Right.
Granted, some of them went inside, and they were still inside. They don't really talk about how they've secured the sanctuary before they roll out either, or how they managed to shoot zombies in two straight lines when they weren't.
It was just magical zombie wall curating, much like the French curate Versailles. Yeah. It was like zombie gardening. It was so symmetrical.
Yeah. And Morgan and the other snipers do nothing to prevent them from doing this. They don't ever. I thought the whole point was that they were opening fire on saviors when they saw them in the windows.
Right,
but
and
he just watches them for a while.
He just watches them and waits till they then.
Till they've built their walls.
Eventually, he had many options to take some of them out and didn't. And I feel like I think even just watching for a while, it was pretty clear what they were doing. Yeah. So why don't you take them out while they're in the windows and not undercover? Because they were even when we see later on in some of these later episodes, when he's watching them, he has a clear shot of all of them, and does nothing. It's very odd. So we got that. The other, to me, just incredibly annoying thing is the whole Aaron and Enid storyline with the Oceanside folks.
Yeah, this is why would they think that they should go do this? Who's told them to do this? Nobody, right? They're doing this on their own, but they're like, we need them. Why do they think they need them? They think they're winning. Why do they think they need the Oceanside people at this point?
Right, and the Oceanside people, it's very clear, they want to be left alone. They are not good to outsiders. They're crazy with outsiders. That's what happens. And then Netanya just gets... do you really think Enid would be able to kill Netanya? I don't know. I don't buy it.
I do.
Really?
You don't know. What do you mean? She would see Netanya, recognize her, and say, "Oh, I don't want to kill that grandma," or would she say, "Oh, that person's about to spear Aaron in the face. I have 1 second to react." I mean, the question is really, would she have the presence of mind to see something and fire without really checking her targets? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It just felt a little too easy. And obviously, we know where that's going to lead to once Netanya goes down. And the other very tired storyline is the whole Ezekiel storyline. He's definitely a diminished leader, yet managed to have the presence of mind to be able to make sure that his folks are okay, at least, that they're able to get away. And then does the wonderfully, we knew that, I think we could have seen this coming from a mile away, that he was going to sacrifice himself to the saviors. And that's at least we see him kind of making himself be sort of stuck with them in the kingdom community. So and that's just...
This was the weakest of the 4 episodes.
Yeah, it was really rough. And the other part with Eugene of it, against his better judgment, making sure that Gabriel and the doctor are able to get away. Which I don't know that Negan would have believed that these two got away. What do you think?
Oh yeah, and that a guard just magically had the shits.
Yeah.
And they got away, and they magically got the keys to a truck. Yeah, unlikely, but he does think that there's a spy in their midst, and so maybe he doesn't exactly know who that is yet. Who knows? But yeah, it's probably gonna go badly. I certainly don't think that Eugene would feel confident enough that nobody would point a finger at him, even though he did just come up with a plan to get them out of the sanctuary. So potentially he's banking on that.
Yep.
And Negan's calling him the second most important guy there. He's playing to the ego, but he's a leery dude. He might not. He still might go for him. At the end of the or as the kingdom story is wrapping up, we also see that it's Morgan and Carol who have shown up there, and so that everybody's there's this is it. That's the end for that savior group, because when Morgan and Carol are on the same page, or even remotely on the same page, everybody around them dies. Yeah. So it's not like we were worried. But then, and then at the end of this episode is when we get the big reveal about Carl. And Carl has been acting increasingly weird this episode.
Yep.
By the end of it, you're pretty confident that he's dying or dead or I don't know what. Like, were you
You know
certain?
something's up. Yeah,
'Cause
I knew
like,
something happened.
he's all sweaty. He's limping for no apparent reason during the smoke grenade scene. Like, why was he limping so much?
Yep.
And then finally, Rick and Michonne are also acting. Everybody's acting weird. I think because they're back in this mode of like, oh my god, we're losing to the Saviors again. Like, you want to talk about repetitive storylines?
Yeah.
Holy smokes! 3 seasons later, we're still losing to the Saviors, and it feels very tired.
Yeah.
But by the end of this episode, Rick and Michonne end up in the sewers. They're like staring at everybody that they walk past in really intense ways.
Yeah, in like super creepy ways. It's like, dudes, what is up with you?
Why are you guys just staring at everybody like this? You should be happy that all these people are alive. Like,
yeah.
It looks like nobody from Alexandria was even killed in the attack.
No, and all of this is definitely like shown to be Carl's mastermind plan to get them all to escape.
This is his legacy.
This is his legacy, and but yeah, they like are being bizarre.
Everybody's
like
being weird.
if Rick and Michonne were staring at me like that, I'd be like, what is going on with you guys? Like something totally, I don't know. It was an odd decision, but yeah, I just
we get the shirt lift and the bite is revealed, and it's at the time I was like, what a weird place to get a bite, like on your torso. But it does make sense based on the choreography of the fight scene that they did with Sadiq in the woods.
Okay, it sort of makes sense, but it still kind of doesn't make sense because if you got bitten there, you're not going to just not react like he does. And also, he's wearing like 2 layers of shirts. I still don't think that this would have happened.
Oh, come on. We've seen zombies bite through denim on this show. Like,
I know, but I mean, man, this was like, and this was sort of a, I don't know, this just didn't, I did not buy this at all. But, I mean, they kind of had to make it his torso because had they made it his arm, it's like, why not just cut off his arm, you know?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I understand that, but I still, like, just, and, like, as we discussed before, Chandler Riggs, he's pretty much grown up on this show. Mm-hmm. They had to kind of make this story arc like a dramatic one, and also given the level of importance his character plays for Rick Grimes, like, he's the reason for Rick's being, basically. And that is, and especially if we talk about, like, the source material, Judith is dead in the
comics. She died at the prison,
Yeah, she died long ago, so the fact that she's even around is a little bit different, but, they're going to give Carl his due here and how important he is, and so, they definitely have to make him, he's a hero, he's all grown up in that he's doing these things, and, making his death the catalyst for other things later. I will say that, I liked the initial montage for episode 9, which is definitely the Carl episode.
I wrote down a list of all the things that he does.
Like, it's basically like if you're going to have a last day, he does all the things that, and this is the thing, is within the show, often people don't have this luxury.
No.
Like, they're killed very quickly. They don't get to say goodbye. We've seen that with many other characters. And we've also seen, some of our main characters just reacting to that. So he basically gets to do all the things that you would hope to be able to do in this, like, very fraught and upsetting world. So he spends time with Judith. He makes sure there's a picture of Judith. I mean, we go back way back to when he wanted that picture of his mom from the bar that he and Michonne get. So he makes sure that there's things to remember him by. He writes letters.
Good callback. Good deep cut.
He writes letters to everybody.
He plays with her. He does the handprints. He feels the sun on his face.
Yep. He plants
Eats some candy with Sadiq. Makes a bed.
Yep.
That's the kind of stuff you want to do.
High fives.
High fives. Sit on a rocking chair. Plant a tree.
Yeah. So he does all this stuff. And I think that this is definitely a testament to how important this character is in the show. But I will say that, man, Carl hangs on for such a long time.
He really does.
I remember the first time I was watching it, and now the second time I was watching it, that, man, it's like every time you think he's dead, he talks again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even Bill, who's never seen this episode, was like, "Is he still alive?" And he wasn't even watching it. He was like passively, like listening to it, or whatever. It was just like, I can't believe that Carl's not dead yet.
That's a
He's
sick
been
burn.
dying. He's been dying for a while now, right?
Yeah, they really let him die for a long time. Yeah, and his plea to Rick is like, remember Woodbury, remember when you brought all those Woodbury people into the prison after beating the governor for the first time.
Yep.
And he's like, that was the right thing to do, and you should do that again now with Negan and the Saviors, because there's got to be, killing is the easy way out. We have to, doing it the other way is the hard way. And he also recounts that story of when he shot the guy with Herschel.
Yeah.
And Rick, he's telling this to Rick like Rick's never heard of this before, but that
Yeah.
was why Rick took his gun away and made him be a farmer for like all of season 4.
Yeah.
Like, I think we're all right there with, like, Rick should be like, yeah, dude, I know. Remember I took your gun away?
I was there.
I made you farm pigs with me for like a whole season. Do you know? Don't remember that?
Until they caused, flu for everybody.
There was the whole swine flu zombie
Yep.
thing. That was
Yep.
a bit of a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think, I do think it was interesting that they don't allow Carl to actually let Rick or Michonne do the honors, basically. They
You
never
think that was
actually.
a mistake?
No, I think that makes sense. And I think, given what happened with his mom, I think that's what he's thinking about. He just doesn't want that to be what they have to live with. I do think that, it was definitely heartwarming, the stuff between him and Michonne and him and his dad. But,
the "you're my best friend" stuff. God,
killed me.
That's pretty harsh for Enid. At least she wasn't there to hear that Michonne was his best friend and not her.
Yep.
But when Judith starts crying, or the little actor who plays Judith, or maybe that was just a soundtrack.
It sounded like a soundtrack. I was like,
I was totally like, oh, I can't hack it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's some of that was really touching. The stuff with Michonne, it felt like there was way more chemistry, and there always has been way more chemistry with Chandler Riggs and Denai than him and Andrew Lincoln.
Yeah, I know,
like,
definitely.
You're almost like Rick is like a bystander to his son's death.
Yep.
Rather than instead of like not a participant, but like someone who's actually invested in it. There was just something not quite there between him and Rick.
Well, I do think that some of that makes sense because, like how kids don't always, their parents are in a specific place in their head. And he talks about that a little bit. Like, he basically is telling Rick all these things that mean so much to him that Rick maybe didn't even know. And kids sort of make their own way eventually. And that's kind of what he's done. And they develop their close ties and relationships. And they're not always with their parents. And, Michonne has always treated Carl like an adult, like
or
a member.
like a kid herself.
Well, she has treated him like he is able to take care of himself always. And Rick has not done that. Rick is the parent. So it makes sense to me that they're bonded in a way that him and Rick are not, and that there is a barrier between him and Rick. Even up until the end, like, Rick was like acknowledging that Carl saved all those people and seemed almost surprised that was the case, where nobody else really was, because they've kind of seen that Carl does this sort of thing. But I will also say one last time, Carl is never in the house. He is never in the house. And and the whole thing with him getting taken out, part of what bothers me so much about how he was bitten is that I don't believe it. I don't believe that he would have gone out this way. I think there could have been a better way for choreography's sake for this to happen, but then it would have been obvious that he had been bitten, and I guess that's what they were trying to.
They wanted to
hide.
Delay it for a couple episodes.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah.
But that's
ultimately,
but that was
I think
my
Chandler
thing.
Riggs was the first person, second person on the third on this show who wanted to be killed off just so that he could leave and go do something else with his career. I think the first was Heath. The second was Sasha. I don't remember which order they went off the show, but something like that. Which is funny because they're like much more minor characters than Chandler Riggs was.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was basically like, I need to go work on my career because now I'm 18 and I don't want to just be on this show for the rest of my life. And since his exit, we've seen many more.
Yeah.
on this show and on Fear the Walking Dead.
Yep.
Not all of them are voluntary, obviously. I think that's what makes this interesting, is that, the T-Dogs, Dale actually wanted to get off the show too.
Yep.
Once what's his name got fired.
Yep.
Anywho, it's a interesting, although way too prolonged death scene, 45 minutes long, kind of. And then we also get a little glimpse of Carl's spiritual successor in Henry, who's also never in the house.
Yep, Henry is never in the house. And because we're talking about Henry, we do have to talk about Morgan's batshit crazy thing.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't either. It's like really freaking disturbing. And I mean, we're used to seeing him. He basically, what it's like is that like a switch is flipped and suddenly he's taking everybody out. And even strategically, when it doesn't make sense, like Carol's like, okay, because I mean, they're trying to get Ezekiel, and they could have just let these saviors go. And Morgan's like, oh no, I'm going to go take him out. And he does. And Carol's kind of looking at him like, I don't know quite how this is going to go, but okay, I'll roll with it because I have to, because you're going to get us discovered if I don't help you, know? Yep. And then once they get into the big sort of, I guess, throne room or whatever you want to call it.
Absurd. That's an absurd scene.
It is so absurd. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this.
So somehow, I'm not sure how they blow the one door and then get on the other side of the giant auditorium within seconds, but they do that. Let's just throw that aside for a moment. But the most unbelievable part of this is when they kick over the scenery and start shooting at the saviors, who have spread out throughout this auditorium. Uh-huh. Gavin's in the middle with a couple of other people. There are people at various doors and far down the rows of seats. And Carol and Morgan get up onto the stage and start firing indiscriminately with zero cover.
Yep. And they're fine.
They don't have a scratch on them. They're good.
They're all good. And then Morgan really takes it to another level.
Oh, man. What the hell was happening in that scene?
I don't know. And I don't even know how he would physically be able to do this. But he's basically like, he pulls this guy like...
What is that organ even? Is that a spleen?
I don't know, but like pretty slippery. I don't know that you would have purchase to like actually pull that out of somebody, along with intestines. And I mean, I know they're trying to draw parallels between him and the walkers. And it is gross as all get out, though.
And I love Gavin's reaction to that too. Gavin's the only savior left, and he just looks at Morgan do this, and he goes, "Jesus," and then runs away.
It's like, woo.
It was pretty funny. That was funny, but then it gets worse. Yeah. I mean, Morgan has just ripped a man's innards out with his bare hands. He has pulled a zombie eating Dale, effectively.
Yep.
And then now he goes after Gavin, who's like hiding in a box somewhere, and the shadow scene and the stick dragging through the sand. Yeah. And you're just like, he's now like Jason from Friday the 13th. Thank you. Day of the 13th. He turns into a B-movie horror villain real quick. And then Henry actually brings him back, I guess, to Earth, maybe. Not really. Sort of, but not really. And then Henry kind of takes the decision out of his hands, and it's pretty it's pretty brutal. Henry stabs Gavin from behind through the neck. And then suddenly Morgan's back. And Henry, they do the whole trick where all these characters are saying the same thing over and over and over again. And Henry's like, I had to do it, which is exactly what Morgan has been saying. Mm-hmm. In addition to, no. But, and, you've got these, like, levels of horror from Carol and from Ezekiel. But Ezekiel kind of like comes back into himself, brings it back. He's kind of like, because Carol's getting very angry at Henry, and Ezekiel's like, Carol, back off, man. Like, I'll take care of this. So, I don't know. Not that it was funny, but it was kind of weird where Ezekiel was very concerned that Henry not see the body of the man that he killed. Where it's like, he's seen it all, man. Like, there's no shielding him from that at this point. Like, he's seen it. I don't know. What did you think about that? Yeah, honestly, I'm thinking of like the parallels between Henry at this age and where Carl was during that
Yeah.
the scene where he shoots that kid outside of the prison. Like there, I think, and that's maybe on purpose that they're making him appear to without the guiding hand of a Rick who sees that his son needs some fathering. Henry is going the way that Carl could have,
Yeah.
and so I think maybe there's some interesting ground to cover
Parallels.
there,
Yeah.
but the season continues more of the storyline. uh, but I'm willing to give up on 9 and go to 10, the Lost and the Plunderers. How about you?
Yep. Let's do it.
All right, so this is, we haven't talked about any of the writers, but it looks like all of these had a couple of different writers on them. This one has 3.
Yeah.
Angela Kang has done a couple of these. David Leslie Johnson, Matthew Negrete, Channing Powell, Corey Reed on this last one. So it's like their whole writer's room has been involved in this, which doesn't necessarily give me great confidence because these are not the best of the episodes.
Well, and it's usually when you see multiple writers, it's like, something went sideways, so they had to like bring in reinforcements to make sure that it like was like that something happened.
I do believe that nine was the mid-season finale.
Yeah, and I think this is
No, sorry, it was 8. 8 was the mid-season finale.
Oh,
that was
okay.
December 10th. 9 was the mid-season premiere, which has the
okay.
highest audience numbers for this these 4 that we've watched. And then this next one, Lost and Plunderers, only has 6.8 million, which is another pretty low number for this show, even though it's still a big number. So this episode has Aaron and Enid fighting to persuade the Oceansiders not to kill them. And they make some pretty good arguments. The Oceanside insistence on murdering people is dumb. They should have stopped doing that as soon as they let Tara go, because cat's out of the bag.
You think that they probably would have had a conversation about that, but clearly not. There's a lot of walking in and out of the room, and being like, "You do this, you don't do this," and then they're like, and then suddenly because Aaron's like, "Oh, you really don't want to do this," they release them.
Yeah.
Which is like, I don't know that your argument was any different than anything you have already said, but yet somehow at that moment they're like, "Yeah, we'll let you go."
Well, I think their arguments are pretty persuasive, but yeah, no shit, they don't want to join you. Tara showed up, was okay, but then sold them out, and they got all their guns stolen by these people. And now they killed the grandma.
I don't think they're persuasive because nobody even knows that they're there for all we know.
No.
So nobody's going to come and find them. Everybody will just think that they got killed by the saviors. Yeah.
They don't know that. But yeah, no shit. They're not going to help you. Why would, I've forgotten 100% how Aaron manages to turn this around. So I'm kind of interested to see. Because at the end of this little storyline, he is like, Enid, go back, 13-year-old girl. I'm staying here. So Enid's gonna peace out, and Aaron's gonna figure out a way to convince Oceanside to join the cause, which is just an insane prospect based on the crap that they've put Oceanside through. So what else we got? Stephen Ogg's performance at the dump. We have some more interactions between Simon and Negan, just underscoring their challenges that Negan has to continually like keep him in line, and we see why. Yep. Because Simon turns out as a psycho.
I do think that this conversation between the two of them is a very important one, because Negan is basically like, no, our plan is to continue doing what we're doing and we'll be fine. And we don't, his whole thing is, look, we don't have a ton of humans left. They're resources. You don't want to kill them all. You want to basically strategically make them scared enough so that we can go back to the status quo. And Simon's like, dude, that is clearly not working. And Simon just wants to basically start a new scorched earth policy where they take out all of these people and then move on to other communities.
Yeah.
And Negan's like, no, we just need to get rid of Rick and some of these other interlopers, and we'll be fine. It'll go back. It'll be great. And he kind of forces Simon to promise that that's what he's going to do with the scavengers and just have him do the same thing that he's always done, which is to take out one of their people to scare them to get them back in line. But I think, I mean, at least from my perspective, I think it was very clear that that was not what Simon was going to do. Like, so it's interesting that Negan didn't basically send his own sort of shadow government along to keep Simon in line.
It's very telling that Simon has no Negan hardliners in his group.
Right. So that, the scene between Simon and Jadis is really, like, it's a really rough one.
It's a great scene. It's a great... Oh, man. Pollyanna McIntosh and Stephen Ogg are just doing a bang-up job, even though she has dumb dialogue.
She does.
You know, her just when she punches him and there is remorse, you son of a bitch. And then later when he says to Negan, oh, there was remorse. I couldn't help but laugh, even though it's terrible he just murdered a whole community.
So he basically took out her entire community. Instead of killing one, he left one, which I think was very much a F you, Negan. I'm going to leave one. But the stupid thing about that is that he left the only one that might be capable of some type of revenge down the road. You know, like he left the only one that had managed to keep this bizarro community together, had basically, as Negan said, triple-crossed everybody, and he leaves only her alive, which strategically, man, that's not a wise thing to do.
There's also the foreshadowing during the scene where he's like, what was this place? Why do you have a helipad? Why do you have solar panels?
Yeah. And
she very cryptically does not respond. These are some things we kind of find out more about in season 9.
Yep.
But yeah, they leave her, and Rick and Michonne have walked into the scavenger's place, kind of to make sure they're okay, bring them back into the fold. I don't understand why Rick is so convinced that he needs them all the time when nothing has ever worked out with them.
Yeah, and he says this stupid thing that sounds totally like the scavengers. They're theirs, they're ours, not theirs. And I'm like, ugh, really, writers? Did you really make Rick say that?
Yeah.
But yeah. And, we do have Rick finally having had enough of Jadis's crap, and him and Michonne are like, oh, all of your people are dead? You're just here in a white nightie for some reason? All right.
Well, it's not what she was wearing when everything went to hell. She was wearing like her weird. I don't understand how they all had the same material outfits, to make their clothes out of.
But anyway, like Rick, she finally tells him a little bit about the fact that this was the dump and they made a new place. And I think
she's talking in a normal voice.
Yeah, she's talking normally, and I mean, I guess what still escapes me, like this, I guess, is supposed to be an explanation for why their weird talking ways and all of that, is that they deliberately were being bizarro people for this.
She's like, I had a chance to start over, start fresh, make a new community. I'm like, but why would you choose to have people speak without using prepositions or articles?
Right. And then Rick's just like, enough of you. And him and Michonne get themselves out of there, and they deliberately do not help her get out.
It is weird because why would he went there with some concern about their community, but it's super mercenary because he's like, oh, you don't have an army anymore, I don't care about you. But he went there in theory out of caring about her.
Yeah. But clearly that's not what's happened. And then they do a bit of a double switch, a bait and switch here, because we think Jadis is done for. She's deliberately sort of making noise to attract the zombies. And then, voila, she has this giant meat crunching thing. I don't even know what, I guess this is for like scrap metal, like you like crush the cars and shred them up and stuff like that. And shreds basically her entire community into like a big pulpy mess.
Tamiel. All the other weirdly named fantasy novel people.
And the thing is that she clearly had this capability. She had access to this thing before Rick showed up, and didn't use it. But now she's going to use it. And she gets blood splattered. She's hanging out by the meat shredder. I don't know.
It was a giant pile of meat.
Yeah.
It's pretty gross, but it's also interesting. It shows you that she is not a throwaway character, that she's probably going to stick around for a while.
Yep. And then we get the very interesting end of this episode. Not shocking. We knew this was coming because Carl has written a letter to Negan. And what I do find interesting about this is that Rick doesn't read the letter that Carl wrote to him. He reads the letter that Carl wrote to Negan. He's pissed about it. He's pissed that his son wrote to Negan at the end. Michonne is kind of trying to get him to see what Carl was trying to tell him at the end, that he can go back to being like an aggro chieftain or something. And I do think that he's surprised that Negan is upset by Carl's death. So he gets him on the walkie-talkie. What did you think about this exchange between them?
That was dumb. Like, what's Rick's plan here? You're just going to say, Carl wants us to stop fighting, but guess what? We're going to keep fighting because I hate you and I'm going to kill you. And
I hate that my son even gave you the time of day. This is what it's really about.
It's a little bit too honest. I don't know. Yeah. But, well, yeah. And then Negan's response at first is like, man, that sucks. But then Rick is kind of super aggro, like you said. And then Negan switches to, you were a terrible father and you got your
it's your fault.
And your stupid son got himself killed because you were a bad parent. And that is about the harshest thing you can say to somebody when they just buried their child. So, wow. I thought it was pretty hard hitting, but also like totally useless.
Yeah. And that's kind of where we leave this. Where we leave these characters. So, dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. We still have 6 more episodes of the season. How can they possibly drag this out for 6 more episodes without having all the saviors be dead by now?
We did forget the piece where Simon comes back and Negan questions him about what's happened with the scavengers. And basically Simon's like, yeah, I did what you said, and looks down at the blue paint on his shoes and looks at one of his other fellow, I guess, anti-Negans. I don't know what you want to call them. Gary. But you get the sense that Negan absolutely knows what happened.
You kind of feel that, but I don't know why he would have that impression.
Yeah, I don't either, but he must have a spy is all I can think. But still.
Maybe.
But again, as I said, if he was that sure of that,
really supposed to
mean to him. Yeah. But the thing that if Negan thought that Simon was going to be out of line, and he clearly kind of has this sense, why not do something to counteract that before losing all these people that you say are such resources? So, but that's it. But so onward to next week, I guess. So do you want to just do 2 episodes? 11 and 12?
Yeah, I guess let's in a way I want to just get it done, but
me too. How many more are there?
I think there's 16 total.
Why don't we do, can you do 4?
I could 3. Do 4. Why don't we do 3 and 3?
Okay, sounds good.
So next time we will reconvene to talk about episodes 11, 12, and 13, Dead or Alive or The Key and Do Not Send Us Astray, followed by the final 3 before we put this thing down the week after, hopefully, or sometime like that.
Yeah. Sounds good.
That way we'll be ready to watch the season premiere of The Passage, and then not the Kingdom, but Kingdom.
And I'm excited to talk about those things too. So yes, let's put this brutal season to rest.
Indeed.
If you'd like to comment on season 8, on Carl's death, anything that we chatted about in these overviews, feel free to tweet at us. Reanimated PCast is our handle on Twitter. You can leave us a note on the website, reanimatedpodcast.com, or send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com.
Indeed again. So until next time, thanks for listening, and bye-bye.
Ciao.